Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to the Electric to see Don't Look Now. Classic sort of British horror, thriller, psychological drama thing from 1973. I mean, really classic, like if you haven't heard of it. But I hadn't seen it ever.
I've never seen it until now.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Well, that's interesting. For some reason, I assumed you had.
No, it's one of those things that I feel I should have. But, you know, kind of there are a lot of those films one never sees as much as we're not.
I suppose the first thing is that I am slightly nonplussed, really. I think there might be an element...
Being nonplussed?
Well, I think there might be an... because of its sort of perceived greatness.
It's interesting, because I thought in the first 5 minutes of the film, I thought this is the work of a great filmmaker. You know, I kind of... somebody who's trying to do something with film rather than the stupid beats per plot blah formula. You know, somebody who has not read Sitfield and talked about 3 arc structures and shit like that. I mean, just, you know, the associative editing from the water and the girl, you know, the inside the house, the outside the house, you know, kind of, you know, the rendering of the rain poetic, the filming on reflections. I thought, you know, this is great. This is the work of a great filmmaker, really.
Yeah, I love that editing, and I love the opening. And the editing, the associative editing does come back. I think the sex scene is fantastic as well for that reason. It cuts between them having sex and then dressing for dinner later. But I think there might be an element of certain things about the film being so imaginative that they became more normalised in some sense. Maybe not the associative editing exactly. Okay. I mean, you hardly see that these days.
Let me put it another way, because I came out with the question, you know, what is the point where a story is kind of symbolic and requires interpretation, and when is it just badly told? You know, because I definitely came out of the cinema feeling, you know, this is great, this has such great things, but I don't get it.
That was kind of... I texted my brother, he's seen it before and he likes it, but I texted him saying, you know, please tell me everything you think because I don't get it, really. It's a loss to me. And to be fair, this is an immediate reaction, and I think it is a film which would...
benefit from further viewing.
I think it would.
It would.
But when it came to Donald Sutherland following the red-coated figure, and then turns around and it's revealed that it's this kind of old dwarf. And she stabs him and his life flashes before his eyes. Well, that's why I think it can be taken as that. I mean, nothing is too clear. That's the kind of thing where I was hoping that in all of the images that come back and the way they would be chosen and associated, I was hoping that it would really sort of make things make sense, clarify things. Everything that we'd seen would kind of bring everything into a kind of logical sense. The only thing that I think it really clarifies is actually just after that, where when you see the funeral, it becomes clear that
he'd had a premonition.
That was a premonition when he saw it earlier on.
So let me tell you the things that I loved about the film. I think Julie Christie is fantastic and fantastically beautiful. I don't remember seeing her more beautiful than this. You know, joy is the wrong word, but she's endlessly fascinating to just see, right? So I love that. I loved the tone and the ambience of the film. You know, you really get the sense of grief, throughout. I love the way that kind of Venice is shot. It's all kind of desolate and isolated and lonely and echoey, you know, and full of vermin and also fog and rain. Yeah, it's you know, it's beautiful and ugly. It's beautiful and desolate. Yeah, it's kind of, you know, so it gives that sense of an interiority. I love the way that you know, there are these shots on very, very narrow streets, right, so that the widescreen flattens out the edges and people seem to be coming from the center of the frame, you know, and then kind of filling it. It has kind of like an eerie effect. I also like that the two protagonists look so hale and hardy amidst the midst of these ruins, right? You know, I was looking at just the tone and the color of Julie Christie's skin, and Donald Sutherland is the same. It's all rosy, right? It's all like almost they're the only sign of life in this city. So I loved all of that. But then there were things that I just didn't get. So, you know, what is it with the priest? Yeah, because he's connected to these premonitions and the supernatural and so on as well. And I just don't get exactly...
Yeah, well, he sort of seems to be. I mean, it's one of those things that only comes through the editing. So much is left unsaid in the film. And so, I mean, literally the only thing that you get about the idea that these are premonitions is when the woman who's blind, you know, it's revealed that she claims, or her sister claims, she's psychic, and then later she says, yeah, your husband has the sight too, even if he doesn't know it. But that is it, right?
Yeah.
It's not, and so the priest is only connected to any of this through the associative editing.
But he recurs throughout.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I don't quite know what his role in the narrative is. I don't get it. There's also a serial murderer on the loose in Venice, right? Bodies keep getting dragged, and you see it in The Inspector, and you see his files, right? So kind of that I eventually got, because initially it's mysterious, but, you know, by virtue of the repetition, you get it. The one thing that is ambivalent, and interestingly ambivalent, but also maybe something that prevents me from making sense of the film, is that the narrative as a narrative never clearly grounds you in the supernatural.
No.
Right? So it's always, you know, somebody saying something, you know, that it could be supernatural, or it could just be like, you know, these old biddies like who believe something, right? And the film doesn't take a stand, so it walks that fine line where it could be possible, but actually, yeah, I mean, there are things that kind of you can't explain away. So that bit at the beginning where the slide turns red, right? You know, but is that just an expressive moment in the film, or is it something supernatural? That's not clear.
I didn't find that to be a question that the film was. I didn't find that to be an ambiguity the film was proposing. It did seem to me clear, or at least my read of it was that it was clear that it was proposing that the second sight is real. I mean, the main sort of concrete, if you like, or strongest bit of evidence of that being the funeral coming back and it being exactly the same, and you having seen it so clearly earlier.
Yes, I suppose.
But
throughout the film, you're thinking, you know, is this somebody's point of view? Is this an evocation of grief in the way that things don't make sense? Is it just a kind of question of belief? You don't see any kind of external, objective. Even that scene.
But I think that is actually one of the really great things about the film. Is the subjectivity to everything, and that it puts you in the state of mind of these characters. I think the thing about it being about connecting this sort of questionable supernatural element to grief, and how the connection is then sort of, again, largely through the editing, that these memories, these images of the daughter from the opening scene keep coming back, and they just show up for a few frames and go away, and they will be related to things, or maybe not. Maybe they will just come back. But the idea that the parents have been, particularly the dad, has been psychologically damaged, you know, as you would be, by the death of his daughter, that he can't help those images flashing into his head. I think the film really effectively puts you into his headspace.
Yes, well, I think that's one of the fascinating things about the film, because, you know, if you read it allegorically, yeah, as about grief rather than about the supernatural, then the film is telling you that the person most affected, grief-stricken, depressed, hospitalized, is the woman, right? It's the wife. But actually the person who ends up dying because of it is the husband. Yeah, and you can make sense of that because, you know, he's the one who tried to rescue her, who's, you know, tried to breathe life into her, who failed, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I thought that was very interesting.
And he's also the one who, when confronted early on with the idea that this blind woman has seen the daughter and says she's okay and all that sort of thing, wants, you know, or has said, oh, she says she's okay from beyond the grave, whatever. You know, he completely rejects it and says it's stupid. And the wife doesn't, she thinks there's a chance it might be true, and keeps going back to these women and develops a relationship with them. The dad is the one who says, no, I'm not having it, which I think for one thing, you kind of might expect in a stereotypical way, like him just going, nah, don't be daft, and she being more open to something silly. But something silly, I think, kind of seems to be true. But then she's not the one, as you say, who then appears to have as much trouble handling the death of the daughter. And I don't think it is just because, well, maybe we can armchair psychologise, but I don't think it is just because he was the one who tried and failed to rescue her. But I think it's like the film sort of suggests to me that the emotional closedness of the dad to this is related to the fact that he can't stop it coming up. The fact that he sees these images. Mind you, she does as well. She actually sees that red hooded figure first, but then he sees it too, and then he's the one who ends up following it. I don't know. It feels like sort of the film sort of suggests the more he tries to repress it, the more he can't stop it from showing up.
Yes, that's plausible reading. What did you make? I mean, there were many things that are clearly symbolic, but that I can't decipher. So they're restoring a church, right? And so one of the things is he's putting this very ugly replacement for an icon. Yeah, it's like this.
Yeah, gargoyle figure on the side of the church.
Yeah.
Because they're all decrepit and
and that clearly has some kind of symbolism, right? So he's about to fall down, and clearly the about to fall down is something that recurs throughout the film. Yeah, the sense of falling and about to fall, and the threat to fall happens several times. But I don't get it. So is there some significance of him embracing that gargoyle, when he's up there? There were other things like, what's the significance of the mosaic and the gold, and because that's just also before he falls, and then you see the gold pieces on the floor, right? I
think there's something general about those things, which I didn't have a read on them specifically. Why was a gargoyle chosen, or why was a mosaic chosen? But there is an idea in them of replacement and copies, and certainly with the mosaic, because he said they've got these new mosaic pieces to restore this old mosaic in the church, and he wants to compare the two bits of glass to see if they're the same colour, to see if it'll work. And there's this thing about them being the same, and I think that's, in a thematic sense, recurs throughout. You've got the thing about this red hooded figure that resembles his daughter, and you really aren't sure. And then at the end, it's I say turns out not to be. Maybe it is maybe that's what people look like when they die in the world of Don't Look Now, I don't know. But there is a sense of replacement or copying or kind of doppelgangering around that.
Yeah, doppelgangering for sure. I mean, the girl in the red hood, the following around Venice, the connection with the clergyman, the being followed by the detective, him chasing after her chasing after him. There's all these patternings. Yeah, I'm just kind of unclear as to their signification. Yeah. I mean, you know that they're significant, but you don't know exactly what they signify or how they fit into an overall. Well, you see a pattern, but I can't decipher it. Yeah. Which, again, might not be a bad thing. But it's frustrating because,
I mean, I think that is one of the things where it's so that makes it so clear that having now seen the whole thing on a second viewing, you'll start to notice things in a way. Yes. I think that's one of those things. It's kind of unavoidable that we can't have that talking about it right now.
Yes, mind you, but I like films like that. I like films, that make you want to see them again, and give you stuff to talk about. Really. I
mean, my thought on leaving the cinema wasn't, okay, at least I've seen that now. Which I think if it had been like a reasonable film from the past I'd heard was clack and I just wasn't that interested in it turned out, I'd be like, okay, I've seen it, move on. But this I would be interested in going back,
There's such interesting things. I remember, the scene where they go to the Vaporetto and it's filmed from inside the boat, right? And you think, why? So it's all streaked, it's dirty. You hear the sounds properly, but the image is kind of partial, slightly dirty, with moments of clarity, but moments where, you know, the dirt and the water is kind of preventing you from seeing. Yeah, quite
I don't
clearly.
remember this scene. Which is this?
It's when he takes her to the airport and they go in the boat.
Right.
Yeah, and that it's a blue boat, and it's all filmed from inside the boat, but they're outside
Yes.
on the pier, right? Kind of, it's full of interesting things like that. But you know, again, I'm not kind of quite sure how to read them really.
I think that line that he says right at the beginning about nothing is what it seems,
Yeah,
and they're talking about the lake. And, you know, if the world's round, why is a lake flat?
yes.
And then he goes, oh, actually, or she finds out, you know, if a lake's huge, then it can be noticeably curved. He goes, nothing is what it seems. And that line, I think, is like key
yes.
to everything.
Yes, I
because
think
it's
you're
all
right.
it's all about these copies or mistaken identities or wanting to make something look like something else. I mean, the whole restoration of the church is about that, wanting to put it back to
what it was.
as close to what it was as they can. Doesn't right at the start? Doesn't the wife say something? This is in England about I can't tell the difference between the new and the old windows that he'd done in a church, something like that.
Ah, right.
There was
But yeah, you're probably right. I don't remember it. But I was struck. Certain things were very striking. So at the beginning, when you see their house in the country, and you have like this kind of idyllic English kind of scene, right? With it's raining, it's in the country, there's a fire inside, you know, quite cozy. But it's something odd because the house is like 2/3 is like brick, and then 1/3 is cladding and white cladding, and you know, it's just an image, but it already kind of disjoints everything. You
Yeah.
know, I was very struck by that, and actually, it's just I suppose an emotional response. Yeah, but it was weird. It's like the house had been divided into 2/3. At first I thought, is it two houses? You know, yeah, because it's like a Georgian house, but like 1/3 had been painted like cream. Yeah.
Yeah. What elements of it do you think you would see in a horror film of today? Do you think? I suppose another. Maybe that's not exactly what I want to ask, but kind of what do you think? What strikes you as being original for its time?
Well, I think it's all original, and actually, I think, you know, kind of your question makes me think, because I don't think you would see very much in a horror film today of what you see here, because everything would be too neatly explained, and the violence, the accent would be on the violence, and so on.
It would be more likely to be considered an art film today with how little it wants to clarify its plot, I think.
That's right. I mean, so my point, I suppose, was going to be that you wouldn't see very much of this in a horror film today, and you definitely wouldn't see any of this, or very little of this, in a mainstream film today. Because, you know, what we have to remember is this was a mainstream film. It's not, you know, some little side thing, right? You know, it was a mainstream film with a national release and so on.
And stars.
And stars. So, so you just wouldn't. I just think you wouldn't see this. It's kind of, you know, when people talk about 70s filmmaking, this is one of the things. This would be one of the examples where, you know, it's kind of, it's about evoking feeling, really, rather than about articulating every plot point so that you get it.
It puts me in mind, in modern terms, it puts me in mind most of Under the Skin, which was Jonathan Glazer, was it?
Yes, yes.
And he did Birth as well, which I think has similar kind of elliptical sort of storytelling.
Yes, that's interesting.
And a generation of a feeling overall.
I can see that.
That it wants to evoke. Which, I mean, I didn't like Under the Skin very much when I first saw it, but I think I was unfair to it.
And yes, I love it. I mean, it's also a film that becomes richer and richer each time you see it. As I'm sure this does. I mean, the other thing that really struck me about this film was really the Technicolor. It's so brilliant. It's a film that looks so brilliant. So everything is like brown tones, really, you know. But then you have like this Technicolor red that kind of seeps out at you and that recurs throughout the film, right? Like, so if you look at the film, there's always a touch of red, even when you're not seeing the girl or the ghost or the dwarf. Julie Christie will be wearing red boots, or Donald Sutherland will have a red
Scarf.
neckerchief.
Look like a scarf or a
Yeah.
neckerchief. Like Doctor Who he looked like.
So there's always like that splash of red that's so vivid in Technicolor that it stands out in the middle of all these muddy browns, or it's a very, very interesting kind of look.
Yeah, that shot very early on of the slide, and then the drop of blood,
Yes.
and the blood's kind of, I don't know, it like grows.
Expanding through the slide, yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah,
And it seemed directed because it didn't just trickle through.
Exactly.
It curved up.
It moves.
Yeah. So,
The use of red is so sort of striking in the film, and it's always done with this. It has a slightly shocking effect at times when those shots of the girl reflected in the little river or lake at the start come back. It's always this flash of red, and the thing of the seeing the hooded figure peeking around a corner and going away. I think the thing is, there are certain things in that respect that I think do resemble things you would see today, but these days it would always be accompanied by a musical sting.
yes.
There'll be a lot of that.
That was interesting, actually, because I thought the use of sound was quite wonderful, but now I'm thinking of the music and I can't remember it.
No, it didn't leave an impression, I suppose.
Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like kind of, we're a bit dull, really, because I'm sure there's a million interesting things to say about the film, but at the moment I'm just kind of stymied, except to say, that I loved it. But I loved it without quite understanding it. Yeah. So what I loved about it was, like, I was enraptured by the experience, and the look, and I just think that Julie Christie is, like Garbo or people like that, one of the most vivid presences in the cinema. And she's really at her most beautiful in this, actually. It's just stunning to look at her.
The sex scene was fantastic. It actually struck me as quite explicit. There was one shot in it that was practically pornographic.
Oh.
I thought. Thinking of... And it went on for a very long time as well, and it was lovemaking from sort of beginning to end, Yeah.
Yes.
And, and then that was the first time I got the inkling of... With the way it was edited, cross-cut essentially, with the scenes of them later dressing and going out. That was the first time I kind of explicitly thought I got the sense of seeing two things at once, seeing two times at once.
Yes.
There is a way in which the film doesn't let you know when it's showing you something out of time.
Yeah, so it's back and forth, past and present and future, but it doesn't signal it to you.
Yeah.
So yes, that's very interesting as well.
I think something else that you might think of it being comparable to modern horror is the way in which it so explicitly sort of connects theme to action in a sort of that sounds dumb, but how we're talking about, or allegorizes is a better term. How we're talking these days about how all these horror films are so explicitly about something else that they're talking about, this sort of thing. And that's always kind of been the case, and people have read into horror, especially for a very long time, in sci-fi as well. But I think that's something that, like, the more people talk about it, the more people are aware of it, and more people do it deliberately, maybe. The more people try to make their films allegories for things, allegories for parenting, or allegories for wherever it might be. That's something that's very clear in this. It is a project of the film.
Yes.
That I suppose is why I changed my question from what would you see today into what do you think was original about it for the time, because that question of whether that is original about it for the time.
I think everything was original about it for the time. I mean, you mentioned the sex scene. That's original for the time.
Yeah.
And actually I think the emphasis being on grief, because I think the emphasis is on grief, rather than on horror.
Yeah.
You know, so I think accenting that is to me original. And also, I think having the male figure die and be in danger rather than making it about the female figure being in danger is also interesting. So he thinks something's happened to her, but actually the one who is constantly under threat is him. So I think that's original.
That is really interesting, actually. I hadn't thought about it that way. She's the final girl.
He's the final girl.
No, he dies. The final girl gets away.
Oh, yes, okay, well then she is.
Yeah. But he was only killed by his own grief. Jose's just gone into the kitchen. Yeah. Well, then that what I'm ultimately getting at, where by connecting the idea of what was original for its time and what would you see today, is the idea of how influential it is and how much of its inventions, if they are inventions, you know, sort of don't seem quite as impressive, possibly because they have actually become.
I mean, it seems
normal
impressive
standard.
to me. I'm like, you know, I think I'm going in my head, you know, just through some images again. You know, the red Mac, you know, the country house setting, the look of Julie Christie with those ringlets and her face, extraordinarily beautiful, but also slightly harsh. Yeah, her cheekbones and her nose, and there's some angles in which her face is very square. Yeah, very, very striking. There are things that I'm wondering about. So one of the ladies, the two sisters, one of them keeps wearing this brooch, you know, and it's obviously very significant, right? Because you see her wearing it all the time. It's huge. It's a copy of something that's actually in the V&A jewelry collection. You know, it's a pearl. I forget what they call it. You know, one of those natural pearls that is not round and it's not pear-shaped. It's like an odd, you know, thing that grows on its own. But they build it into this kind of mythical god figure on a boat rowing. Might be actually, who knows, what is the guy on the boat, Death in the river in Greek. Styx, you know. So it might be that. But it's clearly significant, right? You see it all the time, and then there's the scenes where it's on the dresser and you practically have a close-up of it, right? And I think Donald Sutherland, touches it, right?
Yeah, he does.
It's kind of like, you know, one of those things that's clearly significant, but you can't put your finger on. So I think for me, like, you know, you're already going in your head. There are things that you know are going to stay with you, right? You know, some of the scenes are just of Venice looking so sad and worn and rusty and bleak and foggy, and it's there's a song, an Aznavour song that begins something like "Oh que c'est triste Venise," you know, how sad Venice can be when you know your loved one is not near you to enjoy it. But there is something about, you know, how Venice is shrouded in sadness, really. So kind of, there's already all those things kind of playing in your mind and that you know are going to stay, even without kind of figuring the film out, really.
It's like a grief-stricken state of mind writ upon the city. It feels, you know, it's funny what you were saying about the idea that the city looks so sad, but they bring life to it, those two.
Yes.
Because I think visually they do.
Visually they do. And also there's this thing about all the service industries around them. So, for example, the hotel they're staying in, right? There's a moment where one of them asks, "Are you going to dine here tonight?" And he says no. And, you know, so he instantly tells the waiter to go home, right? That they're the only customers. Yeah. So there's a sense, that things are dead in Venice, as well.
Yeah, it doesn't look like... I mean, I've never been to Venice, but it doesn't look like the beautiful place that everyone wants to, as you say, go to with their loved one. And
well, it looks quite beautiful. I mean, you know, those things of the main canal and so on. I mean, there's still incredibly beautiful shots, and that bridge is the Bridge of Sighs or whatever it's called, the main one. I mean, with people looking at them, I mean, it's still it still looks beautiful, but it does look run down, rusty, falling down. Actually, the film is full of signs saying, you know, Venice is disappearing, help, you know, Venice. So, because it was sinking under the sea. And so for all I know, it's still sinking under the sea. But, you know, periodically there are attempts to kind of, you know, rescue it, yeah? And of course it still exists. But you see signs of that all throughout the film, yeah? Although again, I don't know what the significance is. And there's also a fantastic Charlie Chaplin poster that the camera makes a point of showing you, which is Charlie Chaplin, one man against the world. Yeah.
Is that what it says?
That's what it says. Well, in Italian,
yes.
Uno contro tutti, or one against all, or something like that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, but really, I mean, I don't know what it means.
No, don't know what it means. You just make a sort of mental list of all the things that you don't know what they mean.
Yes.
And it's a film
that you want to find out.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's why you make the list.
Yeah. So, you know, well, you know, at the beginning when I asked this question, you know, at what point, you know, does something, you know, because I think with art sometimes there is a mystery about it. There are things you can't put your finger on, but that kind of resonate, right? So you know, the beginning question, well, to what extent is the film kind of doing that? Or to what extent is it just not telling the story well? I mean, I'm quite sure that, you know, it's the former rather than the latter. Yeah, that kind of, you know, it's things that resonate and that you want to find out things more, and you want to think about it more rather than, you know, kind of dismiss it as something, well, you know, I don't get it and it's not worth finding out.
No, but you can't dismiss the possibility that there are parts of it that may just not be very well told. I'd be interested in reading the short story.
Well, actually, I listen, you can't dismiss the possibility, but I suspect this possibility is very small, because this is a film which feels so clearly structured and so deliberate in its use of imagery, and with so many recurring motifs throughout, you know, that you don't think, oh, this is accidental, this has just been placed here because they don't know what they're doing.
No, no, absolutely. No, not. It's not slapdash. That's for sure. And you can really feel the influence that it had on In Bruges as well. It's one thing that I had vaguely heard, you know, and then you go, okay, so it's got the dwarf and it's got all the. I don't think are there canals in Bruges, or is it just a river system that has been built on?
Well, we were there, so
I've been there.
And there were definitely canals.
I've been there a couple of times.
You know, now whether it was a river before, but there is a whole canal system.
Yeah, there's certainly a system. But anyway, it's, you know, they make good use of that in Bruges, and the feeling of grief as well, actually underpinning everything in Bruges. It's the hitman's.
Yeah, but you can only take that comparison so far.
Oh yeah, no.
In Bruges is like so witty and so fast and such a dark humor and so articulate in its humor. Whereas actually, I think a lot about this film is a kind of inarticulacy. You know, kind of none of the characters can really articulate what they're going through. You know, it's like it feels much more emotionally kind of complex.
I'm not sure that's true, because the wife is all too happy to talk with the strangers about her daughter.
No, the wife is relieved that she's got someone to be able to talk to about it.
Right. Well, I think it amounts to the same thing, though, that she is happy to. You know,
but to say that she's happy to doesn't mean that she can articulate it well, even to herself. I mean, you know, for one thing, she's like talking to bloody psychics. You know, I mean, she's not able to articulate kind of her feelings properly.
Well, that would be the case, but I think it goes more to the point I was making about the husband's inarticulacy emotionally, or unavailability emotionally, being his problem, and being the reason that he is more troubled than she is.
That is true. That's but it's a question of like degrees. I think neither of them are. They're like kind of enveloped in grief, really. You know, so they're suffering, but actually kind of whatever the complexities of their feelings towards each other, towards the child that died, the child that survives, like, you know, kind of all of those things are expressed in terms of feeling, but not, you know, in terms of an articulation of that feeling. So I think it's quite telling, the conversations that they have about, going to the child hurts himself, the other child, and whether to go to them or when to go to them or should they go to them, right? Like kind of so what they say and what they do and what they're feeling are different. They're not being articulate about their feelings.
Yeah, but I do think she is capable of it. That's the thing. I think what you say about her being relieved that she has someone to talk to.
She's better true. At it than he is.
Yeah. But she actually wants to with him as well, and he doesn't want to, fairly explicitly. And when it gets to, this woman's a psychic, she can help us, he shuts it down as quickly as he can. Yes. He's not interested.
Well, which is a motif as well, right? It's his lack of awareness even of, what he clearly has a talent for, which is, to be in touch with the supernatural. He keeps shutting it down. So. Yeah.
But like I said, I think that what that points up in their relationship is his emotional unavailability, but not hers. I think she is keen to try and deal with what she can. It's not to say that she's not feeling grief. I think it's clear that she is. She's very sad, but then she wants to speak about her sadness, and he doesn't want to. He shuts it down.
Yes. Though, yes, no. I mean, I still maintain, that she's not articulating her feelings very well. She wants to hear about her daughter, so she finds out from these women that they can see her, so she wants to talk about her. But you don't get a sense of talking about her feelings of loss or pain or anger or sorrow. That's not being articulated.
No, that's true. She wants to. She might think it's an opportunity to, in some sense, get her back or connect with her.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So, anyway.
Yeah. It's an interesting film, and I don't know if we'll do a second podcast on it, but I want to watch it again at least. I want to try and get a better sense of how it works, and just in a plot logical sense, sort of where things fit. I think that might be nice.
It's one of those films, and luckily now it's a classic because it makes me A, want to see it again, and B, read a bit on it before I see it again. Yeah, so I've now seen it. I've had that experience. I would like to go into a second screening kind of being, better informed.
And I'm interested in reading the short story as well that it's based on, the Maurier story. Which, and that's well, I would normally draw the line, but it's appealing because it's short. It's a short story. It's not a long story that will require a vast investment of time. So I might read that.
All right, good. Well, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Cheerio.
Good.
Right, so it's the next day. We saw Don't It Now yesterday, and the reason for this little added bit is because I was chatting to my brother about it, who I told you has seen it before and likes it. But I didn't get his thoughts, sort of in time for yesterday. But we were chatting about it in the evening, so I wanted to kind of bring up a couple of things we talked about, and maybe see if there's something else to think about.
Okay.
So let me have a quick look at what we were.
I haven't talked to anybody except Mike.
So I said to him, I'm looking for the reasons it's good because frankly I don't get it. That was a text I sent just after we exited the cinema.
Oh, right,
so
okay.
That was before we did the podcast. He said, I know the feeling. It's not like I'm convinced of its brilliance. I don't know well enough to talk at length about it. Last time I saw it, it was billed with Kill List, which I think is interesting because that's another British horror. Because I compared it to Under the Skin, and that's another British horror. And I think there might be something about sort of how, not being knowing that you kind of can't compete with Hollywood on its own terms makes you do
No, I think it's more than that. I think it's a film that sets out to be an artwork. So the whole processes of the beginning are to get you to think differently about different things. I mean, so you would expect the film to be laying out, a narrative structure and a whodunit, and to set up a world that might scare you or whatever. And actually, I don't think the film sets out to do that. I think the film sets out to, it does create a world, and it's attempting to kind of evoke and express a feeling in that world. So I think the project is already different.
Yeah, from traditional horror.
Yes, I was thinking today, because I showed my students Chandaloo and L'Âge d'Or, and of course, they're films that work entirely on images. Like, they're not like normal traditional narrative films. They have a narrative, but they play on narrative, right? Yeah, but the images are so extraordinary that they're doing, a different kind of work. And I think, in a different way, that Don't Look Now is like that, right? Yeah. Like, I did think in the first 5 minutes that, this is the work of a great director. So it's a film that's setting out to do something different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to... I wish I could stop myself from talking about it as horror, because it isn't exactly horror. My expectations were that it was, because everyone does describe it as a horror. No. But it really isn't. It's a psychological drama.
I mean, people were saying, ooh, there was that horrible, scary bit where he falls from the ladder. And I didn't find it scary at all, really. Like, I mean... Yes, they're suspenseful, right? Like, you're wondering whether he will fall or he won't fall. But it doesn't work on me, the way that some horror films where you just, like, scream or you're horrified or you're disgusted. Or I had none of that watching this.
No, exactly. It does have that supernatural element, and it has a bit of a ghost story element to it. But it's not...
Yeah, it hasn't...
It's not out to creep... It's not out to scare you. In that
it has an eeriness, So it has that mood of something that's eerie, that's... supernatural, that is not understandable through reason alone. Yeah, but that's not the same as like a jump scare or something.
No, but and thinking about it, that's also true of Kill List and Under the Skin, in that, I suppose people do talk about them in very general terms as horror. Like, that's the genre they seem to fit closest into, but they're not really. Again, they are doing something different. They're not out to scare you. They're out to generate different feelings. But they do get kind of lumped in, I suppose. And it is hard, once you start talking about them as horror, it's kind of hard to stop yourself.
Well, but it's not very useful, and it doesn't get at describing the film well, or evoking what it feels like to watch well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, to me, the closest thing that it comes close to, and that all of those films have in common, actually, is they're art films. That's what's, you have to figure it out, or you have to kind of get into their rhythms and see what they offer you, and you have to let them take you in a direction that you don't expect, and I think Don't Look Now does that, and
something else my brother said is, he says, I've never felt how the supernatural part quite fits into the grief storyline. And then I said what I said to you yesterday about how the supernatural elements of Donald Sutherland's vision, Second Sight, means that these things, the way that he represses his grief, makes it shoot into his head even more, and then that's kind of combined with this idea that he doesn't know what he's looking at when things happen. He doesn't know that he has these visions. I think it kind of combines them. And then my brother said something which I liked. He said, makes perfect sense, so that's a compliment. And then it's too late for him to face it, and the thought of his daughter has become this demon that kills him, which is, I think, quite a nice way of putting it. Like it makes manifest. His grief is made manifest in that dwarf figure. Yes.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the supernatural and the grief come together, through initially the figure of Julie Christie, right? I mean, she's grief-struck. She has lived through this terrible moment of depression. She meets these people who offer her comfort. It's soothing to think that your child is not gone, that it's somewhere that you could communicate with. Right, so the feeling of grief and the supernatural connect in that moment of, in that moment where she meets the two women. And then certain strands become more evident later. When that Donald Sutherland has these powers, you begin to understand why he leapt, out of the house and into the pond when he saw that slide. Because... they were inside. He didn't hear anything. It was like almost like something supernatural, or, unconscious that made him leap out and go outside and see, how his child was.
Yeah.
So all of those strands, I think, kind of begin to connect.
Well, the way that opening scene is edited has that image, the image of his daughter falling into the pond, that flashes into his mind.
Yeah.
I think is what kind of becomes clearer with the context later on. But that's how it's edited. The image flashes up and he responds to it.
That's right. And also, but there's that moment where, the slide, the red seeps.
Yeah.
And, you go into the water and you see the drops and, you just see like this flash of Technicolor red, but kind of deep in the water, so that like the color, it only begins to seep through or to make itself apparent slowly. It's very beautiful, I think. So I do think it's a great film, actually. Though all of those things about how they connect, like the sex when they're going outside, and there's this melding of the past and the present and the future, and so this moment of connection and of intimacy is already kind of in the past before it's even happened. I think kind of those are very suggestive and beautiful things, and they kind of contribute to the sadness that the film evokes, right? Because really, it is a very melancholic film, and it captures that mood beautifully. I mean, there's grief throughout. I mean, even the rust in Venice speaks of grief and sadness and deterioration.
Yeah. It is really beautiful, and it gets under your skin.
Yes,
I think.
And I suppose that's the thing, that it does get under your skin. And it gets under your skin in ways that are not entirely explainable through reason alone. So, let's say that I had a more clear understanding now of how every bit of the film fit, and how every piece of the film related to each other, which, kind of, let's say for the sake of argument that it does, right? But even without that, I mean, you get kind of certain feelings from the patternings of things, right? Kind of a figure in a red coat, kind of, whose face you never see, or whose face you see differentiated. So there's a different when it's a memory and you see the girl's face, or when they're wandering through Venice and they see the flash of the red coat, where you never see the face, I think.
Yeah. Well, if you did, it would be a creepy old lady.
Well, exactly. So, and then it made me wonder, is that creepy old lady also the serial killer who's been killing all these people in Venice?
Yeah, that's
Right.
it's a funny little. You go, oh, is that the killer? I mean,
Yeah.
I thought actually the old ladies might be the killer at first, like,
Yes, I thought so too.
but he doesn't ever really resolve that.
Yes, because there's a real creepiness to those two sisters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, first of all, what are they doing traveling everywhere? Yeah, and they make themselves manifest, they make themselves known, right? So,
and there's one point where there's a clip of them laughing together, cackling away in their room, like when they first sort of made contact with the wife, and then she's going to come over, and that laughter was like, to me, it made me think maybe they were con artists.
Yeah, they're setting up a trap somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah, or she's fallen into a trap somehow.
But then without that context, the laughter doesn't make as much sense. Like, that would make it make sense. The laughter doesn't make sense to me now, because I know that they weren't, like, on the con.
Well, I mean, I think there are things that are unresolved. I mean, maybe there's a different logic that is not comprehensible to me at the moment. I really like the fact that all the time you're worried about the Julie Christie character, whereas really the person who's in danger is Donald Sutherland. I find that really, really interesting, in terms of gender. So, and actually I think that's something that's maybe not brought out enough. It's like, so he's the one who's constantly reassuring, who's concerned for her, and so on. And it's not until, like, that moment when she returns from the school that you realize, really, he's the one who's in danger. Yeah, and we know that along with her.
I must say, I did get the feeling throughout that he was, maybe in danger is not quite how I thought of it, but I did get the feeling that he was the one who had, like, the stakes were kind of associated with him, in a sense, like the story stakes, like the kind of whatever trouble would kind of develop was more with him, and it's because of what I was saying about how I felt like the Julie Christie character is more, sort of more capable of, or willing to try and deal with her grief in an open way, and it's the fact that he isn't, and is so clearly repressing things, that kind of made me more concerned for him throughout the film than her.
Well, I mean, that makes certain sense. There are things that the film doesn't tell you. So, for example, he tries to resuscitate her and fails, right? Like, pump her.
CPR.
Yeah, CPR. And then you wonder, things you don't see. I mean, does she blame him for it? Does she blame herself? Should they, there's a line later where he's the one who thought it was great that the children should play out in the fields on their own. Yeah.
Oh, right. I don't remember that line.
Yes, it's a line. It's when she wants to do something with the two women and he doesn't want to. And he says, well, yeah. And she begins to give a list of reasons of things.
Sure.
So, yeah.
It also occurs to me, I remember thinking that I'm sure there are elements of the film when they're walking through the streets of Venice that they're getting lost and sort of walking in circles and coming back to places that... There's one point where they're really, really lost, and then they come around a corner and see like a row of shops that they recognise.
Yeah.
Julie Christie says, "Oh, here we are," and it's like come around a corner and I know where I am again. But there is a sense of like there's a labyrinthine feeling to Venice at times.
Yes, well, there's a labyrinthine feeling. There's a feeling of bleakness. I'm trying to make more sense, for example, of the hotel manager, because there's all these things, like he gets a vase out, and something like, oh, lucky didn't break, or lucky you didn't break it, or, so there's all these things about kind of objects in the past and breaking and being out of season and being attentive only to, these two particular travelers who are passing through, right? So it's like, they're passing through a city that is empty, that's out of season, that, is just holding up like an edge of an appearance just for them, which kind of connects with the eeriness, and the supernatural kind of in interesting ways, but I haven't thought of it more than that.
Yeah, you do kind of get the feeling that Venice in this film doesn't exist outside of them, in a way. Like it's not. It's sort of like.
There's no people in it practically.
Right, it's kind of sparse. Everything is obviously about them, but also they're there to. Well, the husband at least is there to change a certain part of the city, with the work he's doing on the cathedral. But it's like, it sounds like a silly thing to say because pretty much any film. Whatever you see of a place is where your characters are going, so it kind of exists for them in that sense. But it does feel like everyone and everything that they see is somehow aimed at them.
Yes, though I think what's different in other films is they're either being held up in this place in a very minimal way, so i.e. the hotel staff is a skeletal staff. They're dismissed when they're not around, right? So there's a sense in which the hotel is open just for them, right? Which means that they're bringing something, but they're also holding things up. And then there's also a sense throughout that they're unwanted intruders. So they're constantly being, shooed away from boats or, or places, right? Kind of, they happen to be chasing the figure in red. And then all of a sudden people will come out and say, get off my boat, or whatever it is that they're saying.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So they're being shooed away from this place, that's kind of empty and desolate, and then makes it seem unwelcoming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, what we didn't mention last time is that this is a 4K restoration.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and actually, that's the reason for showing it in cinemas. And it is really, really beautiful.
It is.
And actually, I also think it's something that demands being seen in a big screen, because if you have the attention span that I do, I tell you, you're seeing those images and they're quiet and they're held for a long time, and and my mind would be wandering to other. I mean, I'd be on Twitter or Facebook or and actually, it's a film that you have to allow yourself to be enveloped by.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially because I suppose it was rather a lot slower than I expected.
Yes.
I mean, my expectations were of a really, really weird kind of active horror. That's everything that I knew about it, or thought that I knew about it, everything that I heard gave me the sense that this would be kind of throwing sort of madness at me from every angle, which is not what it does at all. So the fact my expectations were so off kilter, off caliber with what actually the film was, meant that sort of had I seen it on a small screen, something like that, I may well have lost interest.
Yes.
And it's that thing of being locked in keeps you there. You have to watch it and realize what it actually is.
Yeah, it's that kind of film. It really does demand being seen on a big screen, and this is a very, very beautiful restoration.
Yeah, it was great. So,
all right, thank you very much.
Yeah. That's cheers.
I want to pour myself a bit more coffee.
Of course you are, my son.